Hello and welcome to the Group M University. Today we're going to cover social media and specifically community management. The purpose of this training is to review all the essential components necessary to create, build and grow thriving communities for your brands in order to truly harness the potential of social media. This training will be broken up into a number of different sections that cover everything from why do community management all the way through to exactly how we execute. So let's start with the why, the purpose of social communities. Specifically, we're going to examine what role is the community going to play for your brand, where does this sit within the wider digital picture, and what does this mean for the way that the brand engages in social media. Firstly, it's worth noting that a well-marketed community has a number of benefits for brands. Specifically, it can be an optimized platform for brand campaigns, for driving successive promotions, for commerce or e-commerce, and of course for consumer dialogue. Moreover, you can also deliver valuable insights from managing a community. These can come from observation and also from the great insight tools that are attached to platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. And finally, you can create organic growth, word of mouth and viral spread of brands' content and conversations, thus generating that elusive and cherished earned media. There are a number of reasons why brands should engage in social communities and a number of ways in which they could converse within them. Here are the three main reasons we see for brands being active in social communities. Firstly, in order to be entertaining. So, to provide an area for further category, brand, product or campaign involvement. Secondly, in order to be useful. So to provide an area for customer service, reassurance or advice. And finally, to be valuable, to provide money-saving opportunities via special offers, discounts and coupons, etc. Interestingly, if you were to ask consumers the order they would rank this, all studies show that valuable usually ranks number 1, useful would usually rank number 2, while entertaining would rank number 3. Conversely, if you spoke to brands about this, they would usually expect entertainment to be the number 1, so to find out more about specific brands, products or campaigns. This is important to note when you later consider the way in which you're going to converse within a community. Going through these one at a time, a great example of a brand doing excellent work in the entertainment area is Red Bull. I mean, a look at their Facebook area, it's absolutely stacked full of entertaining, mostly video content. If you're looking for a great example of a really useful social profile, then look no further than Comcast and the way in which they've switched almost all of their customer service onto Twitter. And finally, a truly valuable community. The Burberry page is an excellent example of this, providing unique offers and discounts for its members. The next thing to note actually is that social spaces do not operate in isolation. They're always going to be part of a much larger digital ecosystem. Of course, we need to understand this relationship and the effects that this can have. This illustration shows that actually owned social channels are a mere part of a much broader ecosystem, and that each part of that ecosystem can feed the other. So of course you have your own social channels such as Facebook, but we also have to take into account that you have the broader web with socially connected websites, you'll have forums, you'll have search, and actually when you think about driving traffic and fan numbers to your own social channels, you're going to have all of the paid for media that exists on top of this. So viewing your own social channels such as Facebook in isolation is a very dangerous game to play, and we should always stress that we can see the bigger picture. Once we understand our purpose, within social media, and we can also understand where that fits within our wider plan, we can begin to think about how exactly we want to address our consumers within social media. And for this, we're talking specifically about tone of voice. This will take into account the purpose of the brand page, but of course also the brand equity. Some examples of types of tone of voice would be authoritative, for addressing customer service questions, for example, so actually proving that you are in the know. Are you inquisitive? For example, caring, and a great example would be parenting communities in this instance. Or actually, are you going to be a fun and playful brand, to reinforce a brand's positioning perhaps? Let's take a quick look at some of the examples of these. So, links, or acts as they're known in parts of the world, very much have a fun, highly male, youthful tone of voice, which is very much in line with the brand equity. And we can see all of their social purposes, from their conversations through to their content, reinforce this fun, male, youthful, cheeky brand equity. And so what you get is one coherent story coming from the brand, no matter where you come into contact with it. If we're thinking about a caring and informed tone of voice, one should look to brands such as Cow & Gate in the UK, whose entire purpose is to be supportive of new parents. This shines through in everything they do, from their above-the-line communications to the way in which they converse with their audience on Facebook, and the content and the applications that are then created. So it's about having this consistent messaging, whether it's in above-the-line push communications or when it's in much more conversational dialogue that we see in social networks. We're now going to look at how to grow your community. This can be using paid for advertising and also organic growth. Firstly, it's worth talking about social advertising opportunities. These are often going to be used to kickstart fan growth before we invest in the larger paid for advertising opportunities. Often we're going to use social advertising to signpost our presence within a social network. But also, more and more often, social advertising opportunities are being used to boost reach within social networks. Facebook has its EdgeRank algorithm, which effectively cuts out all but around 10 to 15% of brands' posts. And if we want to appear in that newsfeed, so within the stories of friends and families, we need to ensure that we're using paid for advertising to really boost our reach. Similarly, on Twitter and also on YouTube, we can see paid for advertising opportunities being used to drive the reach of our content. This image here illustrates three of very many different options that one can actually use when it comes to buying Facebook advertising. And it's worth noting that these are options that are changing all the time. At the top, we see a fairly basic reach and recruitment ad, so a cost-effective fan recruitment mechanism. In the middle, the page post ad, so actually boosting the reach of a page post that we have created. And finally, at the bottom, a sponsored story ad, which really is used to act as influence via peer recommendation. In this instance, I've been served an ad which has a recommendation from a friend who's already liked a piece of content within a brand page. And it's that social context which makes the sponsored story ads and peer recommendation ads so much more effective when it comes to driving engagement levels. Of course, we talk a lot about Facebook, but one can't ignore the plethora of advertising options that we see within the other large social networks. For example, promoted tweets, promoted trends, and promoted accounts within Twitter, and of the many advertising opportunities available within YouTube, promoted videos being one that's specifically designed to drive the reach. Of course, using paid for advertising is only one piece of the jigsaw when it comes to driving fan acquisition and driving reach of content. Another piece that we have to bear in mind is that we need to socialize all of our paid for media. In other words, we need to think about how we can use traditional paid for media, so the bread and butter of media agencies, to really drive further engagement on our social profiles. This can be as simple as a TV ad having "Join us on Facebook" created at the end, or including a Twitter hashtag, or it could be as complicated as creating TV campaigns that are driven by social uptake, such as the example that originated from the UK recently for the Mercedes advertising campaign using hashtags. Thinking about our overall digital ecosystem is also really important here. So if we are socializing our advertising, where do we want this traffic to go? Is it to go to our Facebook page? Is it to join us on Twitter? Or actually, do we think that our TV advertising or above the line advertising push should drive to our more traditional owned channels, such as the brand website? But that's not all. Because of Open Graph and social plugins, we can now allow external websites to integrate aspects of the Facebook experience. And this means that users are able to interact with content on their other favorite sites using their Facebook login, upon which time actions and reactions will be noted within Facebook. So you no longer even need to be logged into Facebook to have the effect of the platform. Finally, it's worth thinking about the holy grail of community growth, and that is organic growth. And really here, it's all about having great content that drives engagement. So organic growth is harder to plan and predict. It's always going to be a result of the distribution of content that fans want to share and engage with, e.g. videos, photos, competitions, etc. And the purpose of this is to ensure that friends of fans are exposed to a brand's presence. Great content engages users and ensures they have a longer dwell time and contact with your brand, and it'll also ensure that they'll interact more frequently. So what are the rules for creating great social content? Unfortunately, there are no hard and fast rules, but as a guide, they should either be useful, in other words, they'll save time or add value in some way, or they'll be entertaining. In other words, they're going to waste time or reward you in some way. So an excellent example of a useful piece of content or content generator would be the Nike Plus running app, or the Jamie Oliver meal recommendations. Whereas on the far right hand side, great content that rewards or wastes time, think about many of the more amusing viral videos that you will have seen in the last few years. The next stage we're going to speak about is proactive community management, and specifically the need for engagement. The first thing to note here is that activation is a long-term goal and must be always on, meaning we must have a proactive approach. And actually this is something that clients and agencies need to get their heads around, because it's a shift from the old model of a very campaign based approach, and one that now relies upon a constant stream of perhaps smaller pieces of content which are used in between large campaign bursts. As mentioned, the key to this is driving engagement, because actually engagement is going to drive visibility and growth for your brand online. If we think about it like this, the average Facebook user has around 300 friends who are producing a lot of content. At best, around 15% of our fans will see our posts in their newsfeed as a result of EdgeRank knocking out most of the content that Facebook feels is not appropriate to go in our newsfeed. So what we need to do is ensure engagement with the content that we are putting out, so the Facebook algorithm thinks that it is appropriate to put more and more of our brand content into the newsfeed. Engagement equals visibility, and visibility equals organic growth. So through a local community approach and by delivering the right content, not only will fans see content, but they'll also interact with it. This will be published in their news feeds, exposing our content to the friends of our fans. And of course, this comes with added credibility because it's got social contexts. This content and context will prompt friends to interact or join the growing community organically. It's always important to think of hints and tips that we can use to ensure that we're going to create engaging content. And there are, again, no hard and fast rules, but research has shown that actually if we keep it short and sweet, there is more likely to be user engagement. So in other words, there is a negative correlation between post length and engagement. The longer the post, the less likely a fan is to engage. Timing's obviously hugely important. Generally, the end of the week postings will produce higher engagement rates, and postings that comment on something that is in the news or part of the social zeitgeist will usually prove more popular. Action keywords are key. As it turns out, fans are rather obedient when it comes to responding to wall posts, so using words like and post both gathered really positive engagement rates. Test and learn. So as mentioned previously, Facebook and also Twitter have really excellent insight tools available, and using these to understand the types of posts and conversations that elicit the most feedback is important because it means we can fine-tune our posting strategy. Of course, flexibility is also important. So to reiterate the point above, listen, learn and act, understand what your community are talking about, and you never know what might come from it in terms of a content strategy. And finally, use images to ask questions. And this is a very simple trick, but we know that images have a much better edge score, and will also usually generate much more feedback from users. So using an image to ask a question will usually generate a higher engagement rate. Next, we're going to talk about reactive community management, so why we must have a structure in place to deal with user conversations, and of course how to create this structure. Preparing to react to what our communities have to say is hugely important. In the modern age of communications, consumers genuinely expect brands to have a voice. They expect them to be able to converse with them. Therefore, it's important that the consumer and the brand are able to engage in a two-way dialogue. However, we have to note that even if a brand is not willing to be engaging in conversation, there are still going to be conversations that are going on out there about them. So actually, we need to understand how best to engage and join those conversations. Therefore, we need to develop workflows that ensure that managing consumer comments is consistent with brands' expectations and, of course, done in a timely and appropriate manner. The first step to this is creating a decision tree or comment assessment framework. Basically, this will categorize the type of post that we have received on a social media site. In this example, it's been divided up into questions, discussion posts, policy breaches, negative comment, positive comment, or suspected spam. And actually, within each of these buckets, there will be a workflow that will be initiated once we have decided what type of post has been posted. From there, we can go straight into our workflow. So in this example, a question was posed to the brand. The next step would be for the community manager to acknowledge the question and advises a response will follow. From there, the community manager will record details and alert the client contact. From there, the community manager will review a response library, and this is a library of questions that will have been worked on with a client at the very setup stages of a social media community management project, and fine-tuned as we go on. So the community manager reviews the response library, and if the question has been in the library before, they post the approved response. If the question has not been in the library before, they request the client to advise of the appropriate response. The client then provides the community management manager with the response. The manager then responds and then of course updates the library. And so what we're seeing here is consistency in response from a client side, and one that is completely within brand equity. But it is also empowering the agency more and more to answer as the library of answers becomes larger and larger. And here is an example of that response matrix. So it would divide up into positive, negative and ambivalent sentiment. It would have a list of questions, how to respond, so whether you thank the user or you offer to help, and an example reply. And a key point to note here is that it's not always the best route to simply use a out-the-box response. There has to be an element of human nature injected within the responses themselves. Some tips when setting up response mechanisms. Firstly, it's okay to manage users' expectations, and that means setting rules of play. For example, if you say you're only going to respond between 7 and 7, Monday to Friday, then consumers will only expect responses during those times. It's important to understand the context as well. So in some cases, we know that users might prefer to self-moderate. For example, if they want to flex their own knowledge muscles. So understanding when to get involved is key. We don't want to completely dominate the conversation that is happening within our community. The next thing to note is that of course it's important to have an escalation process in place. Some questions simply can't be answered by an agency representative, so we need to ensure that there's a process in place to escalate technical or sensitive questions to the brand. We need to ensure that the community policy is clear, accessible, and of course adhered to. This means creating a tab that features the rules and sort of point towards the house rules as a reference point if things start to get out of hand. Moreover, if posts need to be removed for various reasons, users should always understand why, and this is again about having that set of rules and pointing in that direction if we see something getting out of hand. And finally, when in doubt, get confirmation. There will most likely be situations where comments, questions or opinions are posted to the wall which require input from the brand or possibly even a PR agency. That brings to a close the community management module. For questions, please follow up with the social media task force. Thank you.